He ordered a mail-order bride out of loneliness. What happened next changed him forever. He lived in a small, quiet town, in a modest house at the edge of the neighborhood. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone, and the streets are lined with familiar faces, yet he somehow felt invisible. His life had settled into a routine so repetitive that he could almost go through an entire day without thinking about it. He woke up early, prepared a simple breakfast for himself, went to work, returned home, and spent his evenings in silence. The walls of his home seemed to echo his loneliness, as if the house itself was aware that no one else walked through its rooms. For years he had tried to build connections. He had dated in his 20s and 30s, hoping to find someone who could truly understand him, but relationships never lasted long. Each ended quietly, leaving him more withdrawn than before. Friends drifted away naturally, some moving to other cities, some marrying and moving on with their lives. Even family visits had become rare. His parents had passed away, and his siblings were busy with their own families. Loneliness was no longer an occasional visitor. It had become a constant companion, sitting with him at dinner, watching him read, and listening as he slept. He had tried filling the emptiness with small distractions. Books, movies, music, even pets at one point, but nothing truly touched the void inside him. Nights were the hardest. The darkness seemed heavier, and every sound of the wind or passing car reminded him of how empty the house was. On some nights, he would sit on the porch, staring at the stars, and wonder if this quiet suffering was what his life was destined to be. One evening, as rain lightly tapped against his window, he found himself browsing the internet. It had started as a habit, a way to escape the silence, but tonight he was restless. His eyes wandered across articles, videos, and forums, until he landed on a website he had seen before but never taken seriously, a mail-order bride service. At first, he laughed at the idea. It sounded strange, almost ridiculous. People actually do this, he muttered to himself, but something about the thought lingered in his mind. He read the stories of men and women who had found each other through the service. Some stories were happy, some not so much, but all of them carried a sense of human longing. He couldn't help but feel a strange pull, a tiny hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be a way to escape his deep loneliness. Nights passed, and he found himself thinking about it more and more. What if there really was someone out there who was looking for the same thing he was? Someone who wanted connection, companionship, and a life shared with another person. It was not a decision he took lightly. He spent hours debating with himself, weighing the risks and the unknowns. He thought about what people would say if they knew. He imagined the potential for disappointment, the possibility of heartbreak. But the thought of continuing his life alone seemed far worse than trying. Slowly, almost unconsciously, he began to fill out the forms on the website. Every question, every detail about himself felt strange to write down. Who was he really beneath the loneliness and routines? Would she like him? Would she understand him? Weeks passed. He kept checking his emails, hoping for a response, imagining what it would be like to finally meet someone. He didn't know much about her yet, only what the website allowed: her name, age, a few photographs, and brief descriptions about her life and interests. But even these small glimpses brought a strange excitement. He imagined conversations over dinner, walks in the park, quiet evenings where he wouldn't feel so alone. The thought of having someone share the silence with him began to feel like a warm light cutting through the grayness of his days. Despite the growing anticipation, there was fear too. He worried about what it would mean to open himself to another person after so many years of solitude. He wondered if he still knew how to connect with someone, if he still had the patience or the kindness required to build a relationship. The walls he had built around himself were strong, and for years they had kept him safe from disappointment, but now they threatened to block something good from entering his life. Every night he asked himself the same questions. Was he ready? Could he risk it? Could he really trust another human being again? Eventually, the day came when he received the first message from her. It was short, simple, and polite, but it carried a hint of curiosity, the same hint of hope he felt inside himself. He read it over and over, savoring every word, analyzing every sentence. A conversation began slowly, carefully. They exchanged messages about their routines, hobbies, and dreams. He learned that she, too, had lived a life full of challenges, that she had hopes and fears just like him. The idea of a stranger becoming a part of his life seemed surreal, almost impossible, but he couldn't deny the spark of excitement it brought. As their messages continued, he felt something stirring inside him that he hadn't felt in years: anticipation, hope, and a cautious sense of joy. He imagined her arriving in his town, stepping off the plane, walking into his home. The thought made his heart beat faster, yet also filled him with anxiety. What if reality didn't match his imagination? What if they didn't get along? What if he had made a mistake that could not be undone? But loneliness has a way of pushing people toward action. He realized that he could spend the rest of his life wondering, or he could take this leap, with all its risks and uncertainties. After long nights of reflection, he decided to move forward. He confirmed the arrangements, booked a room in his house to welcome her, and prepared himself for a meeting that could change everything. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something important, something that mattered. He spent the following days cleaning his house, preparing meals, and trying to imagine the best way to greet her. He thought about conversation topics, about how to be polite, how to be kind, and how to show that he was a person worth knowing. It was strange, preparing for someone he had never met in person, but the anticipation also brought a sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he was not just going through the motions of life. He was waiting for something, working towards something that mattered. Even in the quiet moments, he found himself daydreaming. He imagined them laughing together in the kitchen, talking late at night over cups of tea, walking through the streets of his town with no one noticing them, but feeling like they were exactly where they belonged. He imagined learning about her life, sharing stories from his past, discovering new things about himself in the process. Every thought carried a mix of hope and fear, a strange combination that made his heart both heavy and light. And so, as the days passed, the quiet man who had spent years alone began to feel a shift inside himself. He realized that the emptiness he had carried for so long could perhaps be filled, not by things or distractions, but by the presence of another person who truly cared. The choice to reach out, to invite someone into his life despite the risks, became a turning point. He was still nervous, still unsure, but he was moving forward, taking a step that could never be taken back, toward a future that was uncertain but filled with possibility. The first part of his journey was not about grand gestures or instant happiness. It was about hope, courage, and the quiet realization that loneliness did not have to define him. It was about opening a small door in his heart and stepping toward the unknown. And as he prepared for the day she would arrive, he felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear, knowing that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. The day finally arrived when she was supposed to reach the town. He woke up earlier than usual, his heart racing, filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness he hadn't felt in years. Every detail of the day seemed important: what he would say, how he would greet her, even the small things like making sure the house was tidy and welcoming. He paced around the living room, arranging flowers in a vase and straightening the chairs, trying to imagine what she might think when she first stepped inside. When the taxi pulled up in front of his house, he could see her through the window. She stepped out carefully, carrying a single suitcase and a small handbag. She looked around, perhaps overwhelmed by the unfamiliar surroundings, the quiet streets, and the strange new life she was about to step into. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment everything felt heavy and strange. Neither spoke for a few seconds. He offered a shy smile, and she returned one that was polite but cautious, full of hesitation. As they entered the house, the first awkwardness began to surface. Words didn't come easily, and the silences felt long. He could see that she was observing everything carefully, taking in the details of his home, and trying to understand the man she had only known through letters and emails. He wanted to say something meaningful to ease the tension, but the sentences he had rehearsed in his mind seemed inadequate. They sat in the living room, a kettle boiling softly in the background, and spoke in small, careful phrases. He realized quickly that she was not someone who would simply adapt to his life. She had her own thoughts, habits, and personality, and she was determined to be herself rather than just fit into his world. Sometimes her words seemed direct, almost blunt, and at first it irritated him. He was used to being alone, used to having things in his life remain predictable. Yet beneath the irritation, there was also a quiet admiration. She had courage, resilience, and a strength that he had almost forgotten existed in other people. Days passed, and they tried to settle into a rhythm. He learned about her life back home, how she had grown up in a small village, how she had worked hard to support her family, and how she had dreamed of seeing the world and building a new life. She listened carefully when he spoke about his childhood, his parents, and the years he had spent alone. It was strange for both of them, navigating the unknowns of each other's experiences. Some days were filled with laughter, as small misunderstandings turned into funny moments. Other days were heavy, as memories of loneliness and loss made conversation difficult. One afternoon, they went for a walk through the small town. The streets were quiet, the sky a soft blue, and the air crisp with the beginning of spring. As they walked, he found himself talking more freely, telling stories from his youth that he had never shared with anyone. She listened without judgment, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply nodding. It was a new experience for him, to speak openly and have someone truly listen. He noticed the way she smiled at small things, how her eyes lit up when she laughed, and he realized that the little moments mattered more than the grand gestures he had imagined before. Yet, despite the progress, challenges remained. Cultural differences sometimes caused confusion. Simple things like meals, daily routines, and gestures of politeness required explanation. He realized that the world she came from was different from his, and understanding her required patience and empathy. He began to see that love and companionship were not just about sharing space. They were about effort, understanding, and willingness to adapt. Every disagreement or misunderstanding was a lesson, teaching him how to listen more carefully and how to express himself without frustration. He also noticed the fears she carried. She was cautious, hesitant to fully trust him. She had left her home, her family, and everything familiar behind, stepping into a life she did not fully understand. He could see in her eyes the uncertainty, the quiet anxiety about whether this arrangement would truly lead to happiness. For the first time, he understood that her courage was not a sign of fearlessness, but of hope. Hope that life could be better, hope that someone could truly care for her. The realization made him respect her even more and reminded him that he, too, had to open himself completely if this relationship was to work. As days turned into weeks, small routines began to form. They cooked together, sometimes laughing at failed attempts to recreate familiar dishes from her homeland. They shared long evenings over tea, discussing dreams, fears, and the little things that had shaped their lives. Even moments of silence became comfortable, a quiet presence that was no longer heavy with loneliness but filled with a sense of companionship. He felt something new, something he had not experienced in years: connection. It was not instant love or fairy tale romance, but the steady, gradual formation of trust and understanding. One evening, after a long day of errands and chores, they sat on the porch watching the sun set. He noticed her quiet demeanor, how she seemed lost in thought, and he gently asked if she was all right. She hesitated, then spoke about missing her family, about the uncertainty she felt in this new place, and about her hopes for the future. He listened carefully, realizing that her emotions were just as valid as his own. For the first time, he truly saw her, not as someone who was there to fill his emptiness, but as a complete person with her own life, dreams, and struggles. It was a turning point in his thinking. He understood that the relationship was not about escaping loneliness or finding convenience. It was about two people meeting each other halfway, learning, adapting, and growing together. He started to pay attention to the small things, how she preferred her tea, how she liked to arrange the flowers on the table, and the books she enjoyed reading. The little details mattered, and he realized that noticing them was a way of caring. Each gesture, no matter how small, began to bridge the gap between them. However, not everything was easy. There were moments of tension, moments when words failed, and moments when the fear of failure loomed large. One afternoon, a simple disagreement about a household task escalated into frustration. Both felt misunderstood and unheard. He wanted her to adapt to his ways. She wanted him to understand her perspective. They sat in silence afterward, both unsure how to move forward. That night he reflected deeply, realizing that patience and empathy were necessary. He wrote down his thoughts, planning how to talk openly and honestly the next day. The following morning, they sat together over breakfast. He apologized for not listening carefully, and she explained her feelings calmly. Slowly, they found common ground, understanding that disagreements were not failures but opportunities to learn about each other. The experience taught him humility and respect, reminding him that relationships required effort and emotional honesty. He felt a new sense of responsibility, not just for his own emotions but for the well-being of someone he cared about. Over time, their bond grew stronger. Shared laughter, small adventures, and even challenges began to create memories that were meaningful. He realized that her presence was slowly changing his daily life. The silence that had once felt suffocating now had gentle interruptions of conversation, shared smiles, and quiet companionship. For the first time in years, he felt alive in a way that went beyond routine survival. His heart was opening to the possibility of connection, of being vulnerable, and of experiencing life fully again. The man also started noticing changes within himself. He became more patient, more attentive, and more willing to share his feelings. He realized that his loneliness had made him close off, but now, through the presence of someone who genuinely cared, he was learning to trust and hope again. Every shared story, every small act of kindness, and every moment of mutual understanding reinforced the idea that love was not about possession or convenience, but about respect, empathy, and genuine human connection. As the weeks continued, he no longer saw her as a stranger or a solution to his loneliness. She had become a person whose presence mattered deeply, whose opinions he valued, and whose happiness became important to him. And she, too, was learning to trust him, to open her heart, and to share her life with someone who was no longer just a man she met through a website, but a companion, a friend, and a partner in the journey of life. By the end of the first month, he realized that the arrival of this stranger from a faraway land had brought more than companionship. It had brought a challenge to his old ways, a chance to rediscover himself, and an opportunity to experience life beyond the walls of loneliness. It was not a perfect relationship, nor was it easy, but it was real, filled with learning, growth, and the slow, steady building of trust. And as he lay in bed that night, listening to the soft sounds of the house and thinking about the day, he smiled. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel empty. There was anticipation, there was hope, and there was the quiet knowledge that life could change in ways he could never have imagined. The journey had just begun, and though the road ahead was uncertain, he felt ready to walk it, with her, by his side. As the days turned into weeks, their lives began to intertwine in ways that neither of them had expected. The man had started to feel a warmth in his home that he had not known for years, while she had begun to feel a small but growing sense of belonging in a place that was once completely foreign. Yet even as they grew closer, the shadows of the past and the fears of the present began to surface. Both realized that the journey they were on was not just about companionship. It was about learning, confronting their own insecurities, and discovering whether they could truly trust each other. One afternoon, after a long day of errands and household chores, a disagreement arose over something trivial. She had organized the kitchen in a way she thought made sense, placing utensils and groceries according to her habits from home. He, however, had grown accustomed to his own system and found it difficult to adjust. What started as a minor frustration soon escalated into raised voices and tense silences. For a few minutes, both felt anger and disappointment bubble up, emotions they had not expected to feel together. After the argument, silence settled over the house. He went to his study, closing the door behind him, while she sat quietly on the couch, staring out the window. Neither wanted to admit that the disagreement had touched a deeper nerve. For him, it was not just about the kitchen. It was about control, about fear of change, and about the insecurity that had grown over years of isolation. For her, it was about being understood, about being accepted in a place that was not her home, about proving that her way of life was valid even in a new world. That evening, he could not sleep. He kept thinking about her, about the argument, and about how quickly small misunderstandings could turn into tension. He realized that he could no longer treat this relationship lightly. It was not a simple arrangement or a convenience. It was real, with emotions, expectations, and consequences. He had to face the fact that he was developing feelings for her, feelings that went beyond relief at no longer being alone. The thought made him both anxious and hopeful. The next morning, he decided to take a step he had never taken before. He apologized sincerely. He told her that he had been wrong to focus on trivial matters, that he needed to listen more, and that he wanted to understand her better. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and relief. She, too, shared her feelings, explaining that she sometimes felt unsure if she truly belonged, and that small misunderstandings made her doubt whether they could connect fully. In that conversation, they both realized the importance of honesty, patience, and empathy. Their bond strengthened after that day, but deeper challenges were still to come. As she began to settle into her new life, memories of her family and her home country would surface unexpectedly. Some evenings, she would sit quietly, staring at photos she had brought, her eyes misting over with emotion. He observed her from a distance at first, unsure of how to comfort her. He had never been good at expressing feelings, and he worried about saying the wrong thing. Yet slowly, he learned that presence and attention mattered more than words. Sitting beside her, holding her hand, or simply listening without judgment became gestures that conveyed care and understanding. Meanwhile, he began to confront his own fears and insecurities. He realized that for years he had avoided emotional risks, building walls around himself to protect against disappointment. But with her, those walls were being chipped away gently, moment by moment. He found himself worrying not just about her comfort but about her happiness, about how his actions affected her, and about whether he was becoming the kind of person who could truly connect with another human being. It was both frightening and liberating to feel emotions so strongly again. One afternoon, they decided to take a small trip to a nearby town. It was the first time they had spent a day entirely outside the routines of their lives. As they walked through unfamiliar streets, visited small shops, and shared snacks at a local cafe, they discovered more about each other's personalities. She was curious, playful and quick to laugh at little surprises. He was cautious, observant, and thoughtful in ways she had not noticed before. Together, they balanced each other, learning how differences could complement rather than clash. It was in these shared experiences that they began to truly understand that companionship was not about agreement in everything. It was about respect, adaptation, and shared moments. Yet, emotional challenges remained. One night, she confided in him about the hardships she had faced before leaving her home, financial struggles, personal sacrifices, and dreams she had to postpone to come to this new country. She spoke softly, sometimes pausing to collect her thoughts, revealing a vulnerability that struck him deeply. For the first time, he understood that her courage was not the absence of fear but the presence of hope in spite of fear. He realized that love was not just about sharing joy, but about witnessing another person's pain and standing by them with empathy and care. In turn, he began to share pieces of his own past that he had kept hidden for decades. Memories of loneliness, regrets over relationships that had failed, and the grief of losing family members came out in quiet, heartfelt conversations. She listened without judgment, offering comfort and understanding in ways he had not experienced before. He realized that his own healing was happening alongside hers, and that their relationship was a mutual exchange of trust, vulnerability, and emotional growth. As the relationship deepened, they faced another test, questions about the future. She wondered aloud what her life would look like in this new country, whether she could truly build a home here, and whether he could embrace the changes that life together would require. He admitted his fears as well, fear of failure, fear of inadequacy, and fear of losing her. But instead of letting these fears drive them apart, they spoke openly, exploring solutions, compromises, and shared dreams. It was a turning point where they realized that love was an active choice, not just a passive feeling. Through these experiences, the man began to see that his initial reasons for seeking companionship, loneliness, and the desire for someone to fill the emptiness in his life, had shifted. He no longer saw her as a solution to his problems. Instead, he saw her as a partner, a person with her own life, who deserved respect, understanding, and care. The realization transformed him. He understood that relationships were not about convenience or escape, but about growth, patience, and mutual support. There were moments of joy that contrasted sharply with the challenges. They cooked meals together, sometimes failing humorously and laughing at the results. They took long walks in the evening, discussing everything from trivial daily occurrences to dreams for the future. Small acts of kindness, like making tea just the way she liked it or remembering small details she mentioned days before, became powerful symbols of care. Every day brought lessons in empathy, patience, and understanding, lessons that reshaped the way he viewed life and relationships. Yet, the journey was not without struggle. A few weeks later, a misunderstanding threatened to shake their growing bond. He misinterpreted something she said about her previous life, taking it personally and feeling hurt. She, in turn, sensed his withdrawal and felt rejected. Tension built, creating a few days of quiet distance. During this time, he reflected deeply on the mistake, realizing that assumptions and pride had created unnecessary friction. He reached out, explained his feelings, and listened as she shared hers. Once again, honesty and communication became the bridge that healed their connection. Through these ups and downs, they both grew emotionally. He learned to face discomfort, manage conflict, and express his emotions openly. She learned to trust, to share vulnerability, and to adapt to a new environment while remaining true to herself. Their relationship became a partnership built not on convenience or superficial attraction, but on mutual understanding, patience, and a shared commitment to navigating life together. By the end of part 3, the man realized something profound. The experience of opening himself to another person, of confronting fears and insecurities, and of caring deeply for someone who was not obligated to be there had changed him fundamentally. He no longer felt the numbness of isolation. He felt alive, aware, and emotionally connected in ways he had never imagined. The journey was far from over, but he now understood that love and companionship were not about finding someone to fill a void. They were about mutual growth, shared vulnerability, and the courage to face life together, whatever challenges it might bring. And in these moments of reflection, he recognized that what had started as a desperate attempt to escape loneliness had transformed into a true journey of the heart. He had learned the value of patience, empathy, and emotional honesty. He had learned that human connection required effort, understanding, and courage. Most importantly, he had learned that love was not something that could be ordered, arranged, or taken for granted. It had to be nurtured, respected, and shared equally. As they sat together one evening, the quiet comfort of the home surrounding them, he realized that the woman sitting across from him was no longer a stranger. She was someone who had touched his life in ways that were deep, lasting, and transformative. And while the path ahead was uncertain, he felt ready to walk it, confident that whatever happened next, he had already begun a journey that had changed him forever. By now, months had passed since she had first arrived in his quiet town. The initial awkwardness, the misunderstandings, and the cultural adjustments had all been replaced by a rhythm that was theirs alone. Life together was no longer a novelty, but it was alive with meaning. The man had changed more than he could have imagined. The loneliness that had once defined him was replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. Every day, he woke with the thought of her. Every evening, he felt gratitude for her presence. It was not a perfect life. There were still small disagreements, minor frustrations, and moments of doubt, but these no longer frightened him. He understood that the strength of a relationship was not in avoiding conflict, but in facing it together. He had learned patience, empathy, and the importance of listening. He realized that emotional growth was not a single moment of revelation, but a series of small, consistent efforts, acts of care, and choices made every day. She, too, had transformed. The fear and uncertainty she had carried when she first arrived had softened. She had learned to trust him, to rely on him, and to share her life openly. She had found ways to blend her old world with the new one, creating a space where she could be herself while feeling connected. She laughed more freely, spoke more confidently, and contributed to their home not just as a guest, but as a partner. Together they had created something neither had anticipated, a real partnership built on respect, understanding, and shared experiences. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, a quiet understanding settled between them. The man chopped vegetables while she stirred the sauce, their movements synchronized in a way that reflected the comfort they now shared. Conversation flowed naturally, about trivial matters at first, then deeper thoughts about the future. They spoke about dreams they wanted to pursue, places they wished to visit, and the life they hoped to build together. It was a conversation filled with hope, ambition, and mutual support, a sign of how far they had come from the tentative beginnings months before. During this time, the man reflected on how much he had changed. He realized that his loneliness had been a shield, a way to protect himself from disappointment. But through this relationship, he had discovered that vulnerability was not weakness. It was a bridge to connection. He had learned that love required honesty, effort, and courage. And more importantly, he had learned that companionship was not about filling an emptiness, but about creating shared meaning and joy together. Their relationship was now stronger than ever, tested by small conflicts and strengthened by understanding. One morning, she confided in him about missing her family. She spoke with quiet longing about her parents, siblings, and friends far away. He listened carefully, offering comfort, but also suggesting ways to maintain connections through letters, calls, and video chats. He realized that part of love was supporting someone's identity and history, not expecting them to leave it behind. By helping her stay connected to her roots, he deepened the trust between them, showing that he respected her fully as a person. They also began exploring shared interests. He had never been much of an outdoors person, but she encouraged walks, gardening, and small trips to nearby towns. He found joy in activities he had once ignored, enjoying her laughter and companionship along the way. Similarly, she joined him in quiet evenings of reading, home projects, and cooking, learning from his habits and traditions. Each day brought a blend of old comforts and new experiences, creating a rich tapestry of life together. There were moments that made them both laugh until their stomachs hurt. One day, while trying to cook a dish from her home country, they accidentally spilled sauce everywhere, turning the kitchen into a colorful mess. Instead of arguing, they laughed together, cleaning up side by side, and in that moment, the man realized how joy could be found even in imperfection. Life was no longer about avoiding mistakes or frustration. It was about sharing experiences and finding laughter, even in challenges. As the months progressed, they grew more emotionally intimate. They discussed their fears, dreams, and past regrets with honesty. He admitted that he had once believed he was incapable of love or connection, that loneliness was his permanent state. She shared her own doubts about whether moving to a new country and leaving everything familiar behind had been the right choice. But through these conversations, they reassured each other, showing that commitment was not just about promises, but about mutual understanding and support. One afternoon, a small but meaningful event occurred that changed the man forever. While looking through some old family photographs, he realized how much he had missed sharing life with someone. Memories of past loneliness surfaced, but they were accompanied by gratitude for the growth he had experienced. He looked at her and saw not only the woman who had entered his life months ago, but the partner who had helped him rediscover hope, kindness, and emotional strength. He realized that love had transformed him in ways he had never imagined, making him more present, compassionate, and open-hearted. She, too, acknowledged the change. One evening, she told him that when she first arrived, she was unsure if this life could ever feel like home. Now she felt a sense of belonging, warmth, and trust that she had never felt before. She thanked him for his patience, understanding, and willingness to grow alongside her. They both understood that the journey they had shared was not just about companionship. It was about personal transformation, emotional healing, and learning to love without conditions. Together, they faced challenges as a team. There were bureaucratic hurdles, small disagreements, and moments of exhaustion from adapting to each other's habits and routines. Yet, these challenges only strengthened their bond. The man realized that the essence of life was not about avoiding difficulty, but about navigating it together, with respect, care, and shared responsibility. The woman, likewise, learned that adapting to a new environment required flexibility, patience, and trust in the person she had chosen to build her life with. One particularly memorable evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting the calm and fulfillment they felt inside. He reached for her hand, feeling the warmth and presence that had grown so deeply over the months. Words were unnecessary. They had learned that connection was often silent, expressed through small gestures, shared laughter, and moments of quiet companionship. In that moment, the man felt a deep sense of peace, realizing that life had offered him more than he had ever hoped for when he first decided to reach out in loneliness. As time continued, the man noticed lasting changes within himself. He became more patient, more empathetic, and more aware of the needs and feelings of others. He found joy in small acts of care, preparing her favorite tea, remembering the little details she mentioned in passing, and supporting her dreams alongside his own. He had become a better listener, a more thoughtful companion, and someone capable of emotional openness that had seemed impossible just months ago. Likewise, the woman flourished in her new life. She gained confidence, learned to navigate challenges, and embraced a life that at first had felt uncertain and intimidating. She found joy in the routines they had created together, the small adventures they shared, and the emotional safety that their relationship now provided. She realized that home was not just a place, but a feeling created through trust, love, and shared experiences. One day, they both reflected on the journey that had brought them together. From the man's initial loneliness to the woman's courage in leaving everything behind, every step of the journey had been filled with lessons, challenges, and growth. They acknowledged the fears, the misunderstandings, and the moments of doubt, recognizing that these were the very experiences that had shaped their bond into something meaningful and lasting. The man understood that what had begun as a desperate attempt to escape loneliness had transformed into a true emotional awakening. He had learned to love and be loved in return, to trust, and to value another person's feelings as much as his own. He realized that the emptiness he had carried for so long could never have been filled by mere presence. It was filled by understanding, shared experiences, and the active choice to care for another person every day. The woman, too, recognized the transformation. She had entered a new world with uncertainty and fear, but found trust, friendship, and a deep emotional connection. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Together, they had built a life of emotional richness, trust, and shared joy, a life far beyond what either had imagined when the journey began. In the quiet moments, when they sat together in the evenings, they often reflected on how much they had grown. He no longer felt the suffocating weight of loneliness. She no longer felt the fear of stepping into a foreign world alone. Together, they had created a home, not just of walls and furniture, but of trust, laughter, understanding, and love. Their lives, once filled with uncertainty and fear, had been transformed into a shared journey of growth, connection, and hope. By the end of this chapter of their lives, the man understood a profound truth. Life could change in ways that were unimaginable when one was alone. A single choice born out of loneliness had led to a series of events that transformed his heart, mind, and soul. He had learned that human connection was the greatest gift of all, that love was not a solution to emptiness, but the bridge to fulfillment, and that life's unexpected paths could lead to the most meaningful transformations. And as they sat together, hand in hand, looking at the quiet town around them, he smiled with the realization that loneliness had been replaced by companionship, fear had been replaced by trust, and emptiness had been replaced by love. What had started as a desperate attempt to fill a void had grown into a life of meaning, emotional richness, and lasting connection, one that had changed him forever, in ways he could never have imagined.